Welcome to Filmflix Movie Recap. In today's recap, we're going to be reviewing the movie called Jumper. The story follows the shy teenager, David Rice, who has a crush on Millie, a girl with a passion for traveling the world. One day, David surprises Millie with a snow globe of the Eiffel Tower as a gift, but the bully, Mark, takes it and throws it onto the icy river. Despite the danger, David ventures out onto the icy river to retrieve the snow globe. But he falls through the ice, and is swept away by the swift current, with no hope of survival. He suddenly finds himself lying in the library, gasping for air and alive, in a sudden rush of water. After trudging home in a soaking wet state, David's father scolds him for his condition. David then retreats to his room and secures the door with a chain, but his furious father breaks through it, only to find that David has disappeared in a gust of wind. David suddenly finds himself in the darkened library. Realizing that he has teleported there once again, he comes to the realization that he now has a way to escape his current situation and change his life. Much like his mother did when he was just 5 years old, he returns home to gather some money and personal belongings before leaving town, but before he departs, he stops outside Millie's house. Despite her mother's comforting embrace, Millie remains convinced that David has perished. However, when she hears a noise and discovers the snow globe sitting on the swing set, she knows that David is still alive, but he doesn't respond to her calls. On the following day, David takes a bus to the city and rents a cheap room. He spends time in the park practicing his teleportation skills and mastering the control of his power. With his newfound abilities, he then scopes out a bank and successfully robs it by teleporting directly into the vault. During the night, amused by his discovery that his bag is too small to carry all the money, he teleports back to his hotel to retrieve another bag, and repeats the process until he is surrounded by piles of cash in his room. However, his heist draws the attention of the enigmatic Roland, who claims to be from the NSA, and shows little surprise at the locked door robbery. It becomes clear that Roland is aware of teleportation abilities, and is part of a powerful group determined to track down the bank robber. Several years have passed, and David now resides in an upscale city apartment adorned with pictures of his travels around the world. He has accumulated a substantial amount of wealth, which he keeps in a small vault room. He indulges in life's pleasures wherever he goes, whether it's surfing in Fiji, having lunch atop the Sphinx in Egypt, or picking up a girl at a British pub. He avoids walking even 2 paces by phasing from one spot to another in his apartment, and ignores the plights of ordinary people shown on television, such as those struggling in floodwaters. However, his peaceful existence is interrupted by Roland's arrival, who uses an electrical weapon and wires to prevent David from teleporting. Roland reveals that his life's mission is to eliminate jumpers, people who teleport, as he believes that only God should possess the ability to be everywhere. In a state of desperation, David somehow manages to escape and teleports back to his childhood bedroom. His father, alerted to his presence, pleads with him to stay, but David teleports away as his father forces the door open. David's luxurious lifestyle is interrupted, and he decides to visit his former love interest, Millie. He discovers that she still resides in their hometown, working at a bar. David's old adversary, Mark, picks a fight with him, and in a rush, David teleports them into a bank vault before leaving him there. Returning to the bar, he proposes to take Millie to Rome, which shocks her, but as it has been her lifelong dream, she agrees. In Rome, he shows her around the ancient city, but their attempt to visit the Colosseum is foiled, as it is closed. David refuses to accept this, and opens the gate to let Millie in. As they explore, they encounter Griffin, another jumper who informs David of the existence of a group of people called Paladins, who are determined to kill all jumpers. 2 of them show up, and after a fight, Griffin teleports them away to his lair, where he explains that David cannot afford to have loved ones, as the Paladins will kill them to get to him. After being detained by officials outside the Colosseum, David instructs Millie to return to the hotel, but she refuses. The police continue to question David and confiscate his passport while waiting for other authorities. Suddenly, his mother appears. urging him to abandon Millie and escape within a limited time frame. David recognizes her from childhood photos and is stunned to see her. Meanwhile, Roland has been interrogating Mark, whom David had left in a bank vault, and learns everything he knows about David's past and abilities. Roland also pays a visit to David's father. Feeling the weight of the risk to his loved ones, David seeks answers from Griffin and teleports to his childhood home, where he finds his father on the floor. He cries as he teleports his father to an emergency room for medical help. He then visits Mark in jail to find out what he told Roland. Mark confesses to divulging everything. David later reunites with Millie, but sadly explains that he cannot return home with her. After realizing the danger Millie would face upon arriving in the USA, David pleads with Griffin for help, but is initially denied. David persists and follows Griffin as he jumps through different locations, trying to convince him. They steal a car, and Griffin impresses David by teleporting it through traffic. During the ride, they exchange some personal information, and David learns that Griffin's parents were killed by the Paladins when he was young. After some negotiation, Griffin agrees to help David for a limited engagement, due to his own grudge against Roland. Upon arriving in the USA, David discovers that Millie's flight had already arrived an hour prior. He teleports to her apartment, but Roland and his attack team show up before David can explain anything to her. In a rush, David teleports Millie to Griffin's hideout, but Griffin is upset with him, as Roland can track their teleportations. As Roland arrives, a fierce battle ensues, including Griffin teleporting a bus at Roland. At one point, Roland traps David with his electrical wiring, and prepares to dispose of him later. Millie saves David, but expresses her anger and fear towards his abilities, demanding that he take her home. Sadly, she is soon captured and held hostage. Griffin devises a plan to eliminate Roland by planting a bomb in Millie's apartment. However, David is not on board with this idea, since it would result in Millie and others getting killed. This leads to a heated argument between the two, as they teleport around the world, fighting over the bomb and detonator. Eventually, they end up in a war zone, and David manages to trap Griffin in fallen power lines, just like Roland did to him earlier. Despite knowing he's walking into a dangerous situation, David returns to Millie's apartment. He uses electric wires to tie himself down, and with Millie by his side, he decides to apply Griffin's story by moving only the parts attached to the anchor wires, instead of the entire building. As he unleashes his power, the building starts to disintegrate, and the roof collapses, as the apartment dislodges from it. David teleports Roland to an isolated cave in the Grand Canyon, leaving him there. Roland finds himself stranded on an isolated cliff, grateful that he wasn't dropped in the midst of sharks. David then disappears into thin air. In the winter, David approaches a lavish residence and knocks on the door. A teenage girl answers and David's mother soon appears, sending her daughter to her room. David is there to seek answers about his mother's abandonment when he was a child. She confesses that she is a paladin, and when David made his first teleportation at age 5, she couldn't bring herself to kill him, so she left him because she loved him. David urges her to do more, but she explains that she already is, by giving him a head start. David realizes that he won't receive any further explanations from her. After leaving the house, Millie meets David outside. He asks where she wants to go, and she replies, "Surprise me." They then teleport away. And that's all for this recap. See you in the next one.